right, good morning, everyone. I think it's loading here. Just give it a second. Okay, good morning. I'm James Giglio. I'm the CEO of MVP Interactive. I'm here for October's mentor session, so happy to be here, and hopefully I can bring a little bit of value to some of your questions, so we'll get right into it. Okay, so the very first question is coming in from Lena Kalinsky. The question she asked is, should I be sending caviar as a marketing strategy to big names that reach out to me inquiring about caviar? Background and business description is we specialize in black caviar and other exclusive items. Recently, A.J. Dillon, running back for the Green Bay Packers, reached out to us about caviar but did not go through with ordering. I was wondering if it would be a good idea to send him the caviar as a gift in hopes to earn his trust and gain that relationship with him. Similar to how nowadays brands will send influencers and celebrities PR packages in exchange for an Instagram post, TikTok, etc. Please advise. Well, I don't have any sort of business foundation background in direct-to-consumer products, but I absolutely love the idea. I think you're in the right headspace in terms of really showing value to the people that are potentially interested in your product. I think it shows the extra step, and it would go a long way. I think what you could also do is maybe research a little bit about AJ in terms of what he likes outside of football, some personal interests. And so if you do send him a care package, it would have a nice touch to it in terms of, you know, you going beyond just superficially just sending him the caviar because you already knew that he was interested in that, but then showing some type of representation that, you know, you were really interested in who he was as an individual. And I think receiving a gift that was thoughtful like that could be extremely powerful. I think it's a great idea. Again, I don't have the particular background in direct-to-consumer, but I would suggest outside of maybe seeing other folks here in AO, but dig through some of Gary Vaynerchuk's TikTok posts or Instagram posts, because I think his business was really built on that direct-to-consumer and taking a real special interest in the consumer and potential consumer is extremely valuable in terms of his background. So you might be able to pick up a nugget of strategy just kind of scouring through some of his posts. You know, the other thought that I had was, and I don't know how this is regarded in the industry, but I'm familiar with Cameo where you could pay $50 or $100, you know, to a celebrity to kind of give a message. Maybe there's a way that, you know, you can send him the caviar for free in exchange to even paying the $50 or the $100 for the Cameo and for him to give a shout out to your business and then use that as marketing collateral. But it's a fine line in terms of, you know, doing that initial icebreaker. But I guarantee you, if you send him a thoughtful gift, if you do give him the caviar as well as maybe some other messaging or another gift, I think that would be appreciated on his end, and it would go a long way to kind of break down that barrier to sort of ask for some type of exchange. But I think you're in the right headspace in terms of thinking about what you can do to kind of gain a follower, a buyer, and an evangelist of your brand, right? And so good luck to you. I hope the caviar is fantastic, and yeah, I absolutely love that situation that you're in. So, all right, the next question is Rosalie. It's coming from Rosalie. How can I determine if buying leads is better than organic reach for prospects? I own a full-service accounting firm, and we help small business owners with all of their accounting needs. I am growing my firm, and currently I'm able to buy leads that are in need of my service and ready to buy. However, it's not guaranteed that they will go with our services. The other option is through organic reach, which will be very time-consuming to build that relationship, and they may not need my services at the moment. Totally understandable, and you know, something that I've referenced in the past, and I constantly urge our sales team here at MVP is that lead lists are only as good as they're managed, right? And that means the person managing and qualifying those particular leads. Now, there's going to be some percentage of those leads maybe not being accurate or updated. So you have to, you know, as much as the lead list company is offering, you know, a guarantee of 90% accuracy, 100% accuracy, there's always probably about 10% at minimum that they may not be scrubbed fully, so meaning that they're bad leads. But more importantly, leads really need to be managed, and it's a full-time job. And so you have to determine who is going to be responsible for that. A strategy that has been effective is to hire what's called an appointment setter, right? And so you would be able to give this person that lead list where they're 100% focused on a daily basis just to make appointments to book with you, right? So they're not necessarily selling your service, but they're selling the appointment for your services. Because if I were to guess, I don't know anything about you or your business, but you're probably the best salesperson as well as the best accountant for your firm, and you can't do both because both are a full-time job. And I think starting off, there's an element of where that you have to do everything just because of the nature and the scale of your business, but it's not scalable in terms of you being a full-time salesperson and being the full-time CPA, for example. So I would look into a cost-effective approach, and this could be an hourly scenario with an employee. I know virtual assistants have call centers. There's a company called Magic, for example, that staff virtual assistants. I think there's actually another group here in AO that does very similar services with offshore employees, and so it's a reasonable billable hour in terms of their rate, but you can give them that list and they can just book appointments. So I would not necessarily hire a traditional full-time salesperson because it may seem like that they may warrant a higher salary or a commission that you may not be able to offer. If you do find somebody that's willing to work on commission only, wonderful. That's a win-win for everyone as long as there is enough upside for the salesperson. But I think if you have this appointment setter, or what's called a BDR, business development manager, is someone, or representative, I should say, sorry, business development representative to kind of manage these lead lists, that could be helpful for you. But again, the leads are only as good as they're managed. In terms of the organic route, you're absolutely right. I mean, it really goes back to how much full-time focus you're going to be able to attend to sales and outreach. Sales is a full-time position. Sales is hard. Everyone sees the life and glamour of a salesperson when they do well, but in order to get there, it really takes full dedication. And so, and then you also need set that person up for success in terms of developing a sales playbook, and what the sequence of the outreach would look like with the lead list, or even the organic, right? Where, if you have your scripting, what's the messaging, what your follow-up sequence is, are you using a CRM, and, what's your process in terms of outbound calls and emails. And so, it's a bit of a science, an art and science. Sales is, not an easy profession, but it's 100% the most important one for any business, no matter what you are. And so I guess ultimately what I'm suggesting is you're not going to be able to do both, right? And so you just need to make that decision on how you can offload that responsibility to someone that you think is going to properly manage a lead list or even outbound sales. I think you're accurate in terms of it taking a little bit more time organically, but even still, you're going to have to generate a lead list on that organic reach, right? Because there's a lot of research time that takes into figuring out who your prospects are. And so as long as the lead list is affordable and you can find a counterpart that can set appointments so then you can really drive the sale and be the closer versus the originator, I think that's a good strategy and has been effective across many industries. All right, next question is coming from Eric Blandino. A question they asked: Do I need, and what are pros and cons of having both personal and or business credit as a business owner? And how could I use credit for my benefit? Background on the question and business description is I haven't owned a credit card since 1998. I have bootstrapped my business from the beginning. If I need to buy a vehicle, equipment, materials, coaching, or invest in a new team member, I need to make sales and save. If I don't have the money, then I can't afford it, is the mentality I was raised with. At what point in the entrepreneur journey is credit recommended to grow a business? How does one utilize credit for growth? We're currently at $400,000 plus a year. And what perks could I benefit from using credit cards or lines of credit? Rat exclusion service. We're in the business of giving people their homes back from the invasions of rats. So I think personally, the philosophy on a personal side, not owning or getting into personal debt, is there's not going to be one financial advisor in the world that's going to advise you to tell you to go into debt. So I think the principle of how you were raised is probably a good thing to keep you frugal, and a positive mindset on accumulating bad personal debt. However, it could also be a hamstring for your business. My question is, if you haven't had a credit card in over 20 years, what does your credit profile look like? Because as you go to a bank or a credit card company for your business, there's going to be a need for a credit history and a credit profile. Let's make the assumption that you have a very high score, you have a great credit score, and you'll have access to capital. I think it's paramount for any business to leverage debt properly, because unlike a personal credit where you're buying consumer goods or things that you may not need, you're really investing into your business on the commercial side of things. And so, but that could also get tricky too. So you have to, take the approach of don't borrow more than you need, because that's a slippery slope when you have access to cash. And if you don't have a proven history of responsibility, maybe of having that access, that you can buy the car and get all the equipment that you think that you need, but you really don't in the end. So you have to really be disciplined in how you can use that as growth capital, right? And so the first thing I would do is just really minimize the exposure to the amount of debt that you take on that's not more than you need. You should have a very specific use case for the money, and then a return rate on when you think that money can be paid back, right? And so I think if you take that approach into, okay, this $40,000 is going to be invested into X, which it's going to take 13 months, 12 months, 6 months, 4 months to pay that back, but also, generate a revenue increase of Y. I think that's a positive approach to how you can leverage debt. But I think it's critically important to have access, because again, even your business profile is going to be regarded well in the banking community to help you grow. Bootstrapping, nobody is going to argue against the benefits of bootstrapping a business, but I can tell you firsthand, I think at a baseline, no business should not bootstrap to a degree, but you may hit a ceiling that you don't realize that you're hitting because you don't have any growth capital to kind of take that next step. What if your service was able to bring on 4 other technicians and 2 other vehicles, and what does that do to your total market opportunity, right? And maybe expanding out of your territory. So I guess in terms of suggestions on where to start, depending on that credit profile, getting credit from an LLC is pretty, I don't want to say easy. There's always going to be an element of a personal guarantee, so you will have to guarantee based on your credit profile that you're a qualified candidate for your business, but getting credit through an LLC is a fairly seamless process. I may recommend going down and trying to get a American Express charge card. And the difference between a charge card and a credit card, obviously, is a charge card is due full balance every 30 days. So it gives you a little bit of runway for a couple of weeks, but knowing at the end of that month, you have to pay that balance in full. And that seems like a pretty good or a common mentality that you have since you don't carry debt, where you can use it, you can kind of factor in where your invoicing is, and then feel comfortable that you can make an investment, the first 2 weeks of the month, and know that you have 4 weeks before you need to make that return. And so, it's a good way to kind of dip your toe, so to speak, in credit. The SBA is also a good starting point if you want to get a line of credit. So generally speaking, to my knowledge, in terms of how banks, whether it's an SBA or private lender or community, I would definitely try to stay away from the bigger banks like Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Chase. Talk to your community lenders that understand small business, or maybe you have a community bank that you currently do business with. Start there, but generally, rule of thumb is they're willing to give lines of credit about 10% of your gross revenue. So if you have a clean P&L, you're doing your taxes each year, I think just to kind of give you an idea of what's available to you is about 10%. I could be wrong, but that's been my experience so far. But I would say leveraging positive debt and credit is extremely valuable to a business. And you may realize once you start exploring that could have been maybe some of your hamstring, as I mentioned. But don't ever change the focus and the mindset of bootstrapping and doing what you need to do to make things happen, which is great. But think of growth capital and how you can leverage positive debt to grow and create more income. All right, next question. Kimberly Benjamin, how do I determine direct prices versus wholesale pricing? As a hairstylist, I sell products retail direct to clients, and there are products I purchase at wholesale that I would like to turn around and wholesale to other stylists for them to sell. How do I determine what margin should be for me so they can make money selling it to their clients, but I also make a margin? My advantage is I can buy at higher volumes to get better pricing from wholesalers than they can get. Okay, so again, I don't have expertise in direct to consumer. I know this is a bit of a B2B as well, but we develop software and hardware technology that we essentially manufacture or develop ourselves. So being able to determine what our profit margins are on a wholesale offering, what our costs are versus what we sell it for retail is a little bit easier because the way I evaluate it is what is the overall cost and expense to the business that it takes for me to develop and or to procure said hardware, right? And then from there, you kind of calculate, what your overhead is, what the time of investment, the billable hours that it takes you to do all the things that you can now present it to the marketplace for a resale. Generally speaking, on software for my business, we can see a profit margin anywhere from 60 to 75%, right? Just knowing what the market appetite for pricing for our type of technology. Hardware is a little bit more difficult because there's an inflection point where, if someone's looking to buy, say, a television, for example, they want to buy it from us, they're not going to pay 60 to 70% markup on, a television that they can buy at Best Buy at a MSRP, right? And so generally we cut our margins to about 30 to 35% on any type of resale. And so the formula, I don't know if it's a perfect formula, but I would look at from your business, like what the expense is for you to do and take the effort to kind of retail those items, and then take a look at your competition in terms of what stores are selling it for. That'll give you some market research as to how you can be competitive in that marketplace. The wholesale thing is interesting to me, so I think you're on a good path in terms of buying in bulk and then giving that service to someone else as a potential wholesale. But again, it is wholesale, but there's a lot of effort in what you need to do. You're representing, you're taking the risk of having the warehouse full of this stuff, for example. So you'll need to kind of mark up to a degree what that service is going to cost you, so that you can provide to your buyers that it's still a wholesale competitive rate. So just take a look at the competitive market there. I wouldn't say there's a magic number or percentage, on what the markups should be or what the percentage is, but I think if you're anywhere north of 50%, you're doing great. But I think industry average for most things is 30 to 40%. All right, final question coming from Rosalie. Rosalie asks, how can I become more comfortable networking with wealthy individuals? I own a full-service accounting firm. We help small businesses with other accounting needs. As I'm networking in the community, I've been invited to places that I feel like a fish out of water due to the financial status of the people that are attending. I would like to overcome the imposter syndrome and feel like I belong. I think that's totally normal. I think everyone at one point of their career or in their life has felt exactly what you feel, and it's probably something that more people aren't, as open to admit. And so I think, number one, don't be too hard on yourself for feeling that way, because I think that's a very normal thing. And but the other thing is, the more you're out there, you're going to get more comfortable, and you're going to feel more like a counterpart, within this group of people. I mean, the other side of it is, of course, if you're going to try to compare yourself, that will definitely negatively influence your mindset and how you behave, and you're not going to feel worthy around them. So try not to compare and feel like you need to be a counterpart in terms of dollar for dollar or like what their status is. But the very most important thing that I've learned in being in situations like this, or just being in business, is don't underestimate the need for people, or the interest in people to talk about themselves, right? And so people love to talk about themselves. They like to talk. So a good barrier, whether you're in a networking event or even if you're in a sales situation, is to just ask questions. You can ask questions about anything about the individual that is going to sort of let down their guard, and then you'd be surprised how open and how comfortable people are talking about their shoes, talking about their watch, talking about the weather. I mean, you don't want to go as benign as the weather maybe, but if you kind of specify a commonality in terms of an interest point that you may have, and it could be superficial to a degree, like a watch or shoes or something, but giving compliments or asking questions that's unrelated to business per se is a great way to break down that barrier. It doesn't feel as awkward, as cold as, hey, my name is James, and I'm a CPA and I can help your business. That's you don't want to hard sell in these networking events, and it's nobody wants to be hard sold, right? Like, I think networking events do allow for an opportunity to do business, but it is very much more social and to be around like-minded people. So if you go into an event, you can do some research on the type of individuals. I'm making this up, but if it's at a country club, there's a probably high percentage that there's going to be some golfers there, right? And so maybe that's like, you can kind of go in and talk about golf or ask about golf, or, find a commonality or an interest point for them to let them talk about themselves. And I think that goes a long way. And the more you get comfortable doing that, you're going to be able to move that across your daily business activity too, especially in sales. And so it's always a needs assessment, right? Like, you're not hard selling. It's always figuring out the need and trying to solve a problem in terms of, how you can bring value to someone. So asking a question is paramount to breaking down any barriers there. So, but good for you. I think you're on the right path. Keep going out there, and you're going to get more comfortable. It's just like public speaking, right? Like, the more you do it, the more comfortable you're going to do it, and then you're going to find strategies that work for you. So that has helped me. Hopefully that brings some value. But that is the last question that I have. It was a pleasure, and I guess I'll see you guys next month. Have a good day.